It was meant to be a peaceful drive, a rare moment of solitude for a man carrying the weight of an entire state. Then flashing red and blue lights tore through the heavy rain at an isolated rural gas station, and everything changed. A small-town police officer saw an easy target. He had no idea he had just violently handcuffed the most powerful man in the state. What happens when an officer abuses his badge only to discover that the man he assaulted is the very person who commands the system behind it? Rain poured from the sky in relentless sheets, pounding a wild, chaotic rhythm against the roof of an aging Ford Bronco. Governor Darius Langston loved that truck. It was a remnant of the life he had lived before the executive mansion, before the endless press conferences, exhausting legislative battles, and suffocating presence of round-the-clock security. For once, Darius simply wanted to drive. He had specifically instructed Vaughn Mercer, the head of his executive protection detail, to remain at least 2 miles behind him. He needed the illusion of being alone. Darius had built his political career on discipline and composure. At 48, he was the first black governor in the state's history. Before entering politics, he had been a highly respected civil rights attorney who dismantled his opponents through quiet, undeniable brilliance. But on this drive, he was not wearing one of his tailored Italian suits. He wore a faded gray Georgetown University hoodie, worn jeans, and a dark beanie pulled low over his head. Without the formal clothing, polished shoes, and security agents surrounding him, he looked like an ordinary, exhausted man who needed coffee and a full tank of gasoline. He crossed into Oak Haven County, a notoriously closed and isolated rural district surrounded by dense northern pine forests. Through the fog, the flickering yellow sign of an old Shell gas station appeared like a distant lighthouse. Darius activated his turn signal and guided the Bronco onto the cracked concrete lot, his tires cut through deep puddles filled with oily rainwater. The station appeared almost deserted. The only person visible was an elderly attendant named Everett Pritchard, who sat behind a stained plexiglass window, absorbed in a small portable television. Darius stepped from the Bronco and shivered as the bitter wind struck him. He inserted his personal credit card into the pump, lifted the heavy nozzle, and began filling the tank. As he leaned against the side of the truck and stared into the pitch-black tree line, he finally felt the tension leaving his shoulders. Then the darkness exploded. Blinding red and blue LED lights flashed across the wet pavement. A short, aggressive burst from a police siren echoed beneath the metal canopy. A patrol cruiser, with almost no visible county markings, except for a faint ghost decal belonging to the Oak Haven Police Department, swerved sharply into the station. The officer did not pull into a normal parking space. Instead, he turned the Dodge Charger at an angle and boxed Darius's Bronco against the fuel pump. Darius did not flinch. A lifetime spent inside his own skin had prepared him for encounters exactly like this. He slowly returned the fuel nozzle to its cradle, making every movement deliberate and clearly visible. The cruiser's heavy door opened, and Officer Bryce Holloway stepped into the rain. Holloway was a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s. He had grown up locally, wore his uniform slightly too tight, and carried his authority like a loaded weapon. His right hand rested casually but intentionally on the grip of his holstered firearm. "Step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them," Holloway barked. His voice echoed beneath the gas station canopy. "Good evening, officer," Darius replied. His voice remained calm, delivered in the same measured baritone he used to settle hostile lawmakers during legislative confrontations. He stepped away from the Bronco and raised his open hands to chest level. "Is there a problem?" "I'll ask the questions," Holloway snapped as he moved closer. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his campaign hat. His eyes traveled slowly over Darius's body, lingering on the hoodie, the casual clothing, the dark beanie, and the older vehicle. His expression twisted into immediate contempt. "But what are you doing in Oak Haven?" "Passing through," Darius answered evenly. "I'm heading south toward the Capitol. I needed gasoline." "Passing through," Holloway repeated, skepticism dripping from every syllable. "In a truck registered to a shell company?" Darius sighed inwardly. The Bronco was registered through a blind trust for security purposes, which was standard procedure for senior executive officials. "It is registered to a private trust," Darius explained. "The registration and insurance documents are inside the glove compartment." "Do not move toward the vehicle," Holloway ordered. He released the retention strap on his holster. The sharp snap of the leather was unmistakable. "We've had several burglaries in the wealthy neighborhoods across the ridge. A lot of people matching your exact description have been prowling around after dark." Darius's jaw tightened. The coded meaning behind the officer's words was louder than the siren. "Matching your description." "Officer," Darius said while maintaining eye contact, "I have no interest in anyone's property. Allow me to retrieve my wallet from the center console, and this misunderstanding can be resolved immediately." "I told you not to move," Holloway raised his voice and stepped into Darius's personal space. The smell of stale coffee and peppermint gum washed over him. Turn around and place your hands flat on the hood. Darius hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The governor of the state, a man responsible for a multi-billion-dollar budget and command authority over the National Guard, stood in the freezing rain while a rogue patrol officer ordered him to assume the position of a criminal suspect. Officer Holloway, Darius began, reading the silver nameplate attached to the man's uniform. Turn around, or I will put you on the concrete, Holloway shouted. He drew his taser and aimed the twin red laser dots directly at Darius's chest. Inside the gas station, Everett Pritchard finally noticed what was happening. The elderly attendant pressed his face against the plexiglass, his eyes wide with alarm and a telephone trembling in his hand. Darius raised his hands higher. I am complying, he said calmly. He turned slowly, faced the cold, rain-covered metal of the Bronco, and placed both palms flat against the hood. But I need to state clearly, Officer Holloway, that you are making a catastrophic error in judgment. Shut your mouth, Holloway hissed. Darius felt a heavy, violent shove between his shoulder blades. The officer drove him harder against the vehicle until the Bronco's freezing metal pressed against his cheek. Holloway kicked Darius's legs apart, forcing him into a wider stance. You people always have a smart answer, the officer muttered under his breath, his venomous words intended only for Darius. You think you can drive through my town looking for an easy score? I am not looking for a score, Darius answered. His voice remained remarkably controlled despite the adrenaline surging through him. If you run the license plate through the state database, you will receive a flagged executive notice. Dispatch will tell you exactly who I am. I know exactly what you are, but Holloway sneered. Cold steel closed around Darius's left wrist. The metallic teeth of the handcuffs ratcheted into place with a deafening sound. Holloway twisted Darius's arm violently behind his back, forcing a sharp breath from his lungs. The second cuff locked around his right wrist. They were painfully tight. The steel compressed the nerves in Darius's wrists, sending sharp bolts of pain through his forearms. Listen to me carefully, Darius said, turning his head enough to look over his shoulder. The time for humility had ended. My name is Darius Langston. I am the governor of this state. You are unlawfully detaining the chief executive. When I make one telephone call, this encounter will end your career. Holloway stopped searching him. For a moment, he stared at Darius. Then he released a loud, mocking laugh that carried through the rain. The governor, that's a good one. The governor is sitting inside a mansion, buddy. He isn't pumping his own gasoline in a hoodie at a rural station. Call it in, Darius challenged. His eyes burned with sudden authority, causing Holloway to take an unconscious half-step backward. Run the plate. Better yet, check the left pocket of my jacket. You will find a state-issued identification card. Holloway scowled. His pride had been wounded by the commanding tone of the handcuffed man. I'll search your pockets when I decide to search them. He seized the collar of Darius's hoodie and jerked him away from the Bronco. Darius stumbled through a puddle but quickly regained his balance. Holloway marched him toward the cruiser and pushed his head down roughly, forcing him into the hard, plastic rear compartment of the Dodge Charger. The door slammed shut. Darius was trapped inside the cramped, claustrophobic cage of the patrol car. It smelled of sweat and industrial cleaning chemicals. Outside, Holloway returned to the Bronco. He shined a heavy flashlight through the windows and studied the leather interior. When he saw nothing suspicious, he walked back to the cruiser and opened the rear door. All right, Governor, Holloway mocked, placing exaggerated emphasis on the title. He leaned inside, rainwater dripping from his hat onto Darius's lap, and aggressively searched his pockets. From the right pocket of Darius's jeans, Holloway removed a heavy matte black smartphone. It was neither an iPhone nor an Android. It was a custom-built, encrypted communications device issued exclusively to senior state officials by the Department of Homeland Security. The device had no logo. It was protected by a thick, rubberized casing. Holloway frowned. What kind of burner phone is this? It is an encrypted state communications device, Darius replied. He leaned against the hard seat and refused to break eye contact. It requires biometric authentication. However, if you press the emergency button along the side, it will connect directly to the State Police Command Center. You're unbelievable, Holloway said. He tossed the device onto the front passenger seat and lifted the microphone attached to his shoulder. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I have a subject in custody at the Shell Station on Route 9. Male subject is combative and delusional, claims to be the governor. Static burst across the radio. A bored-sounding dispatcher responded. Copy, Unit 4. Do you need transport? Negative, I'll bring him in. Run a plate for me. Holloway read the Bronco's license plate aloud. Darius sat in the darkness while the cuffs pressed deeper into his wrists. He concentrated on his breathing. He was not frightened. He was furious. He was furious for the countless young men who did not possess an executive title powerful enough to protect them from officers like Holloway. He was furious that this abuse was occurring in the very state he governed. Suddenly, a loud, jarring ringtone pierced the interior of the cruiser. It was not coming from Holloway's police radio. The sound came from the heavy black phone resting on the front passenger seat. Holloway glanced toward it with irritation. The screen glowed an aggressive red. Instead of displaying a caller's name or number, bold white letters filled the screen. Command 0, urgent. The phone rang again, producing a harsh industrial tone. Holloway smirked. Believing one of Darius's supposed criminal associates was calling, he reached across the seat and answered. He activated the speaker so Darius could hear. "Let's find out which one of your friends is calling," Holloway said. Before he could introduce himself, a voice erupted from the phone. It was sharp, controlled, and completely emotionless. It belonged to Von Mercer, commander of the governor's executive protection detail. "Eagle 1, this is Vanguard. We lost telemetry from the primary vehicle. Confirm your status immediately." Holloway laughed. "Vanguard? Eagle 1? What kind of gang fantasy is this?" He lifted the phone closer. "Listen carefully. This is Officer Bryce Holloway of the Oak Haven Police Department. The owner of this phone is sitting in the back of my cruiser in handcuffs. Who are you?" A terrifying silence followed. When the voice returned, its clinical professionalism had vanished. It had been replaced by an icy, calculated fury that seemed to lower the temperature inside the cruiser. "Officer Holloway," Vaughn said quietly. The softness of his voice made it infinitely more dangerous. "Look at the man in the back of your patrol car." "I'm looking at him," Holloway replied, puffing out his chest even as an unexplained knot formed in his stomach. "You have 10 seconds to remove those handcuffs." "Excuse me?" Holloway snapped. "You do not issue orders in my county. This suspect is under arrest for—" "Officer Bryce Holloway, badge number 4492, Vaughn interrupted, reciting the information with chilling speed. "You are speaking with Special Agent Von Mercer, commander of the State Executive Protection Unit. The man in the rear of your vehicle is Governor Darius Langston." Holloway stopped breathing. "I am currently 2.4 miles from your location and approaching at approximately 110 miles per hour. If those handcuffs are not removed before my vehicle reaches the gas station, you will be classified as a hostile threat to the chief executive, and my team will respond accordingly." Holloway froze. Cold sweat gathered along the back of his neck. He turned toward the wire partition and stared at Darius. The man in the hoodie sat completely still, studying Holloway with an expression of profound pity. "This is a joke," Holloway stammered. His bravado began to crack. He seized a shoulder microphone. "Dispatch Unit 4, did you run the plate?" The radio hissed. When the dispatcher responded, all traces of boredom had disappeared. She sounded frantic and breathless. "Unit 4, Bryce, where are you? Give me your exact location." "The Shell station on Route 9. What is happening, Marlene?" Holloway asked, his voice trembling. "Listen to me," the dispatcher cried. "That license plate belongs to a Class A secured government blind trust. The system locked me out. State Police Command in the capital has overridden our frequency. They are demanding confirmation that the governor is safe." Her voice broke. "Bryce, what did you do?" Holloway released the microphone. It swung from his shoulder. The encrypted phone remained connected on the front seat. 7 seconds, Holloway," Vaughn's voice said through the speaker. Holloway's hands began trembling violently. The magnitude of his mistake crashed over him like a collapsing building. His arrogance, assumptions, and racial profiling had carried him directly into disaster. He scrambled from the front seat. Rain immediately soaked his uniform as he rushed toward the rear door and tore it open. Darius had not moved. "Governor, Holloway could not finish the sentence. The balance of power had changed so suddenly and completely that he felt dizzy. He reached for the handcuff keys attached to his belt. His fingers fumbled uncontrollably, and the small metal key fell into the mud. "Leave them on," Darius commanded. Holloway looked up, terror filling his eyes. "Sir, please, let me remove them. It was a mistake. It was dark. I couldn't see." "I said leave them on," Darius repeated. Absolute authority radiated from every word. "You wanted to treat me like a suspect, Officer Holloway. You wanted to make me an example. We are going to finish this encounter exactly the way you began it." "Governor, please," Holloway begged. He dropped to his knees in the rainwater outside the open cruiser door. "I have a pension, I have a family. So do the young men you normally stop along this highway," Darius answered coldly. Before Holloway could speak again, the low mechanical growl of powerful engines rose beneath the sound of the storm. It was not one engine. It was an entire formation. Headlights pierced the fog. The vehicles were not approaching normally. They were swarming the station. 2 jet-black, unmarked Chevrolet Suburbans jumped the concrete curb, their suspensions absorbing the impact. They did not park. They executed a tactical containment maneuver. One stopped directly in front of Holloway's cruiser, the second blocked the rear, trapping the local police vehicle completely. 3 low-profile state police interceptors followed, screaming into the lot as blue and white emergency lights transformed the gas station into a violent storm of flashing color. The siren stopped abruptly. Heavy doors opened at the same moment. 6 men wearing dark suits and tactical vests poured from the Suburbans. They were not ordinary patrol officers. They belonged to the governor's elite executive protection unit, highly trained, fiercely loyal, and prepared to respond with lethal force. Von Mercer led the advance. He was tall, heavily built, and wore a close-cropped haircut. His face looked carved from granite. He did not walk toward the cruiser. He advanced with predatory speed, one hand pressed firmly against the grip of his holstered Seg Sauer. "State police, do not move," a trooper shouted. A patrol rifle was aimed directly at the kneeling officer. Holloway threw both hands into the air and fell backward into the muddy water. "I'm a police officer," he screamed, his voice breaking with panic. "I'm local law enforcement." Vaughn ignored him. He reached the cruiser in 3 strides and shoved Holloway aside with a violent kick to the shoulder. Holloway sprawled into the mud. Vaughn pulled the rear door fully open and looked inside. When he saw Darius sitting with both hands cuffed behind his back, a muscle tightened in Vaughn's jaw. "Governor," he asked, his voice strained. "Are you injured, sir?" "I'm fine, Vaughn," Darius replied calmly. "Just uncomfortable." Vaughn spun toward Holloway. His eyes locked onto the officer who was attempting to rise while surrounded by state troopers. "Get him on his feet," Vaughn ordered. "Disarm him. Take his badge and remove his communications equipment." "You can't do this," Holloway protested weakly as 2 massive troopers pulled him upright. One removed his service weapon with practiced efficiency. Another tore the police radio from his shoulder and ripped the silver badge from his uniform. "I have jurisdiction here." "You no longer have jurisdiction over a puddle anywhere in the state," Vaughn answered, lowering his voice to a terrifying register. He returned to the cruiser and produced a handcuff key. "Allow me, sir." "No, Vaughn," Darius said. He shifted his body and stepped from the vehicle. The governor stood in the pouring rain with both wrists still tightly restrained behind him. The flashing emergency lights illuminated his stern, unyielding face. He surveyed the scene, the terrified attendant behind the window, the neutralized local officer, the vehicles surrounding the gas station, and the ring of elite state law enforcement agents. Darius walked slowly toward Holloway. The officer could not meet his eyes. He stared at the pavement and trembled uncontrollably. "Officer Holloway," Darius said, his voice cutting cleanly through the rain. "Look at me." Holloway slowly lifted his head. "You placed these cuffs on me because of what you believed you saw." Darius continued quietly, allowing only Holloway and Vaughn to hear. "You saw a hoodie. You saw a black man. You saw someone you believed had no voice." Darius stepped closer. "You thought you were the most powerful predator on this empty stretch of highway." He held the officer's gaze. "I am leaving these handcuffs on during the journey back to the Capitol." Holloway's face collapsed. "At the next joint session of the legislature, I will walk to the podium wearing these exact clothes and these exact cuffs." Darius's voice hardened. "I am going to show the entire country what happens on the back roads of the state when officers believe the cameras are not recording." Holloway closed his eyes as a sob caught in his throat. His career, reputation, and future were collapsing before him. "Take him into custody," Darius ordered, turning away. "Contact the state attorney general. Tell him I want federal civil rights charges prepared immediately." The motorcade raced down the interstate like a missile. Black vehicles and flashing blue lights moved in perfect formation through the relentless rain. Inside the lead Suburban, the atmosphere was dense with controlled silence. Governor Darius Langston sat in the spacious rear cabin. True to his word, his hands remained locked behind him inside Officer Bryce Holloway's handcuffs. The steel had warmed against his skin, but the edges continued cutting into his swollen wrists whenever the vehicle struck a bump. His shoulders burned with a deep, throbbing pain. His face revealed nothing. He stared through the tinted window at the blurred tree line while his mind moved with terrifying precision. From the front passenger seat, Von Mercer managed several encrypted communications channels at once. He spoke in short, rapid sentences to the State Police Commissioner, Highway Patrol Command, and the tactical team securing the gas station. "Agent Mercer," Darius said. His voice was quiet, but it immediately cut through the static of the radios. Vaughn turned in his seat. His eyes moved toward the governor's unnaturally strained shoulders. "Sir, the medical team is waiting at the mansion." "Place Lenora on the secure line," Darius ordered. "Use the speaker." Vaughn entered a sequence into the communication console. The connection opened, and Lenora Whitaker's voice filled the SUV. As the governor's chief of staff, Lenora was a legendary political strategist. She was brilliant, relentless, and uncompromising. a woman who had guided Darius through the most brutal political campaigns in the state's history. She sounded completely alert, although a thin layer of panic remained hidden beneath her controlled tone. Darius, Vaughn gave me the situation report. Are you injured? Tell me you are not hurt. My wrists are bruised, and my opinion of rural hospitality has suffered, Darius replied, leaning his head against the leather seat. I am fine. He closed his eyes. But we are about to begin a war, and I need you to prepare the strategy. The Attorney General is already heading to my office, Lenora said. Rapid typing could be heard in the background. Gideon is furious. He is reviewing every civil rights statute available, but we have an enormous public relations vulnerability. She continued quickly. Oakhaven is a police union stronghold. The Police Benevolent Association will begin controlling the narrative as soon as this becomes public. They will claim that you were driving an unregistered vehicle, behaving suspiciously, and refusing lawful commands. They will bury the racial profiling issue beneath procedural language. They can try, Darius replied coldly, but they are missing an important part of the situation. What is it? Holloway did not simply encounter me by accident, Darius explained. He targeted the vehicle. More importantly, before placing me inside his cruiser, he bragged about burglaries in the affluent neighborhoods beyond the ridge. Darius visualized the entire encounter. He openly admitted that the department was conducting a dragnet based entirely on race. He was not patrolling, he was hunting. The typing on Lenora's end stopped. A dragnet, she asked. Darius, if Oakhaven officers are operating an unofficial racial profiling program, this is not simply one corrupt patrol officer. Her voice hardened. It is systemic misconduct. It could justify a Department of Justice consent decree. Exactly, Darius said. But Holloway will not confess, and the Oakhaven police chief may attempt to erase every record protecting the department. Vaughn turned toward the governor. The dashboard camera, he said. Holloway's cruiser uses an Axon Fleet 3 system. It continuously buffers audio and video. The entire encounter should have been captured. Who controls the data? Darius asked. It uploads through a cellular connection to a local cloud server administered by Oakhaven, Vaughn answered while opening another screen. The cruiser's internal drive also stores a physical backup. Where's the patrol car? Lenora asked through the speaker. My team is impounding it, Vaughn said. They are loading it onto a flatbed. However, Oakhaven Command still has remote administrative access to the cloud system. They could activate a deletion protocol before we obtain a subpoena. Darius opened his eyes. They cannot erase what they cannot reach. He shifted in his seat. Lenora, obtain an emergency injunction from the state Supreme Court, freezing every digital asset belonging to the Oakhaven Police Department. We may not have enough time to locate a judge, Lenora warned. What are you proposing? Darius looked toward Vaughn. Where is Oakhaven Police Headquarters? Approximately 10 miles west of the gas station. Send the state police tactical unit, Darius ordered, his voice becoming pure executive authority. They are not going there to request cooperation. He continued without hesitation. Physically secure the dispatch center and server rooms. Establish a complete perimeter. No one enters or leaves, and no one touches a keyboard until the Attorney General arrives with the necessary warrants. Vaughn did not question the legality or unprecedented nature of sending state troopers into a local police department. He served the governor. Consider it done, sir. In the heavily wooded center of Oakhaven, the local police department occupied a low, concrete building beside the municipal courthouse. Police Chief Conrad Baines was awakened by the shrill ringing of the red telephone on his desk. Baines was a heavyset man approaching retirement. He belonged to an older era of policing and controlled the town like a private kingdom. He grabbed the receiver and rubbed his tired eyes. Baines. Chief, it's Marlene in dispatch. A trembling voice answered. You need to come here immediately. It's Bryce Holloway. He stopped someone at the Shell station. If Holloway arrested another prowler, place the suspect in holding. Baines growled. I will deal with it later. He didn't arrest a prowler, Marlene cried, losing all professional composure. He arrested the governor. Her voice rose. He put Governor Darius Langston in handcuffs. State police units surrounded the station. They took Holloway's weapon and removed his badge. Baines dropped the telephone. It struck the desk with a loud crack. Every trace of color left his face. Governor Darius Langston, the former civil rights attorney who had built his reputation destroying corrupt police organizations, had been handcuffed by one of Baines' officers. Primal panic seized his chest. He did not think about Holloway. He thought about the servers. He thought about Operation Night Watch. It was the illegal, undocumented directive Baines had issued to officers assigned to late patrols. They were instructed to aggressively monitor, stop, and interrogate minority motorists who crossed into Oakhaven's wealthy residential areas. The department possessed months of dashboard camera footage, confidential dispatch logs, and internal communications proving the existence of racial quotas. If state investigators obtained that information, Baines would not merely lose his pension. He could spend the rest of his life inside a federal prison. Baines rushed from his office. His heavy boots struck the linoleum floor as he passed the front desk and entered the server room behind the precinct. The room was freezing. Cooling fans hummed around racks of equipment covered in blinking green lights. Baines lunged towards the primary terminal and entered his administrative password with shaking fingers. The municipal database opened. He needed to initiate a catastrophic override. He located the Axon video directory and moved the cursor toward the master deletion protocol. "Step away from the console, Chief Baines." The voice came from the doorway behind him. It was terrifyingly calm. Baines froze with one finger hovering above the mouse. He slowly turned. A state police tactical officer stood in the doorway wearing full combat equipment, olive fatigues, a heavy plate carrier, Kevlar helmet, and an assault rifle held comfortably in the low, ready position. Behind him, more state troopers entered the precinct, ordering the terrified local officers away from their desks and instructing them to surrender their weapons. Captain Pierce Ralston of the State Police Major Crimes Unit moved past the tactical officer and entered the server room. He carried a heavy breaching tool in one hand and a folded document in the other. "What is this, Ralston?" Baines shouted, attempting to hide his terror beneath manufactured anger. "You are invading an independent municipal police department. I will take your badge for this." "You are welcome to try, Conrad," Captain Ralston said calmly. "But first, step away from the terminal." "I am the police chief," Baines roared, pressing one hand against his holstered weapon. "You have no authority inside this building without a federal warrant." The tactical officer immediately raised his rifle. A red laser appeared in the center of Baines's chest. "Let's not turn this into a tragedy," Ralston said, his voice hardening. "The Attorney General is approaching with emergency preservation orders signed by the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court." He stepped closer. "The governor has ordered us to protect the chain of custody until those documents arrive." Ralston pointed toward the computer. "If you touch that mouse, you will be arrested for destroying state evidence, obstructing justice, and tampering with a federal civil rights investigation." Baines looked at the red dot on his chest. Then he stared at the blinking cursor. All resistance drained from him. He raised his hands and stepped away from the desk. "You don't understand," he whispered. "Holloway is reckless. It was a mistake." "It is going to be a very expensive mistake," Ralston replied. He gestured toward two cybercrime technicians entering the room. "Secure the servers. Create forensic images of every hard drive in the building. Lock down all dispatch records." Far away, the governor's motorcade passed through the iron gates of the executive mansion. The historic estate was brightly illuminated and alive with frantic movement. News vehicles had already begun gathering beyond the perimeter after journalists intercepted emergency communications through police scanners. When the lead Suburban stopped beneath the portico, Lenora Whitaker and Attorney General Gideon Shaw stood on the steps beside the mansion's medical team. Vaughn stepped from the SUV first. Governor Darius Langston followed. Lenora gasped and covered her mouth. She had been briefed on the situation, but seeing the reality was physically shocking. The most powerful man in the state emerged beneath the floodlights with rain-soaked, rumpled clothing and both hands still locked behind his back in silver handcuffs. "Darius," Lenora whispered, rushing toward him. Dr. Elias Rowan approached with a trauma kit. "I do not need medical treatment," Darius said calmly. "I need a photographer." Gideon Shaw, a sharp-featured prosecutor with decades of experience, stared at the handcuffs. His jaw tightened with fury. "Governor, please allow Vaughn to remove them. You have already demonstrated the seriousness of what occurred." "The point has not been demonstrated yet," Darius answered. He walked past them and entered the mansion's grand foyer. Light from the crystal chandeliers reflected from the steel around his wrists. "Officer Holloway told me that the governor sits inside a mansion and does not pump his own gasoline." Darius turned toward his advisors. "He told me that people who look like me are prowlers searching for an easy score." His arms burned with excruciating pain. The skin around his wrists had become deep purple, but his eyes remained filled with uncompromising fire. He felt comfortable saying those things and doing this because he believed the system would protect him. Darius stood in the center of the marble floor. "At the next legislative session, I will enter the State House chamber exactly like this." His voice echoed beneath the high ceiling. "I want every major network carrying the address live. I want the world to see what millions of citizens experience every day." Lenora removed her phone and her political instincts overcame her shock. "I will prepare the announcement. We can present it as a special address on civil liberties." She looked at the cuffs again. "But the president of the Police Benevolent Association, Wade Callahan, is already preparing to appear on national television. He will claim that you resisted arrest and refused to identify yourself." Darius smiled coldly. Let Callahan speak. Let him destroy his own credibility in front of the country. He turned toward Gideon. By the time I reach the podium, Captain Ralston will have extracted the dispatch records from Oakhaven. Darius's expression hardened. I want every officer in that department questioned under oath. I want Operation Night Watch exposed, and I want the Federal Department of Justice supporting your investigation. The night was ending. Gray light began filtering through the mansion's tall windows. But the true storm was only beginning. The story quickly grew from a rumor inside a local police department into a national media crisis. Satellite trucks from major television networks crowded the streets surrounding the state capitol. The air was charged with speculation, much of it fueled by controlled information released through Lenora Whitaker's political operation. Inside the green room of a local ABC affiliate, Wade Callahan, the combative head of the Police Benevolent Association, adjusted his tie. He was preparing for a live national interview with morning show host Cameron Blake. Callahan had spent hours speaking with terrified Oakhaven officials and constructing a story designed to shield the police union. He did not know that state police had already secured the department's server room. He believed the local officials still controlled the evidence. Cameron Blake's voice came through Callahan's earpiece. We are receiving extraordinary reports that the governor was handcuffed by a local police officer. What is the official position of the Police Benevolent Association? Callahan leaned toward the camera and adopted a carefully rehearsed expression of calm authority. What happened was a misunderstanding that has been exaggerated because of executive privilege, he said. Officer Holloway was patrolling an area affected by serious crime. He encountered an individual wearing heavily concealing clothing and operating a vehicle with unusual registration. Callahan continued confidently. That individual became combative and refused lawful commands to identify himself. The officer followed established procedure to secure a potentially dangerous scene. He looked directly into the camera. No person is above the law, not even the governor. Inside a private room behind the State House rostrum, Governor Darius Langston watched the broadcast on a muted television. He still wore the rain-soaked, mud-stained Georgetown hoodie. His hands remained restrained behind his back. He had worn the handcuffs for hours. The pain had progressed from a sharp ache to a deep numbness spreading into his shoulders. His wrists were badly bruised, the skin had been rubbed raw, and small amounts of blood appeared where the steel teeth had cut into the flesh. Callahan has destroyed his own defense, Lenora said as she paced the room with a phone against her ear. Captain Ralston has sent the decrypted Operation Night Watch files to the Attorney General. She stopped walking. It is worse than we expected. Officers were deliberately flagging minority drivers and using civil asset forfeiture schemes to finance department equipment. Are the chamber screens connected? Darius asked quietly. Yes, sir. The audiovisual system is linked directly to our secure server, Lenora confirmed. The joint session is assembled. The press gallery is beyond capacity. Everyone is waiting. Darius inhaled slowly as pain moved through his shoulders. Then let's go. The heavy oak doors of the House chamber opened. The room was packed with 200 state legislators, dozens of reporters, and prominent legal observers. Voices filled the chamber, mixed with ringing telephones and whispered speculation. The sergeant-at-arms struck the gavel. Mr. Speaker, the governor of the state. Polite applause began. The legislators expected Darius Langston to appear in one of his signature tailored suits, perhaps visibly angry, but prepared to issue a conventional political condemnation. Instead, the applause died. A deathly silence filled the room. Darius walked down the center aisle. He was not surrounded by smiling political aides. 4 heavily armed state troopers walked beside him, led by Vaughn Mercer. The governor's clothing was dirty. His posture appeared painfully rigid. When he turned to climb the steps toward the podium, the entire chamber saw the steel handcuffs locked tightly behind his back. A collective gasp swept through the room. Several lawmakers physically recoiled. In the press gallery, camera shutters erupted like a swarm of insects. Prominent civil rights attorneys invited by the administration leaned over the balcony, their expressions shifting from curiosity to fury. Darius reached the podium. He could not hold his written notes. He could not grip the edges of the wooden stand. He leaned toward the microphones and looked across the sea of stunned faces. "Good morning," he said. His voice remained calm, yet carried a powerful weight that demanded complete attention. "The president of the Police Benevolent Association appeared on national television and told you that I was combative." Darius continued steadily. "He said I was hiding in the shadows. He told the country that the officer who did this to me was following department procedure." Darius turned slightly, allowing the cameras to capture his bruised wrists and the handcuffs cutting into them. He was correct. The chamber remained silent. Officer Bryce Holloway was acting precisely according to a rule book. Darius looked towards the press gallery. But it was not the rule book of law. It was the rule book of Oakhaven's Operation Night Watch. Confused whispers moved through the chamber. State police tactical units entered Oak Haven Police Headquarters under my direct executive authority, Darius continued. They secured dispatch records, internal communications, and dashboard camera servers before Police Chief Conrad Baines could permanently erase them. He nodded toward Lenora, who stood beside the chamber. The two enormous digital screens flanking the speaker's platform came to life. The state seal disappeared. It was replaced by high-definition video from Officer Holloway's dashboard camera. Audio from the encounter played through the chamber's sound system. The lawmakers watched Darius pump gasoline in the rain. They saw Holloway's cruiser enter the station and aggressively trap the Bronco against the pump. They heard the officer's contemptuous commands. We've had several burglaries. A lot of people matching your exact description have been prowling around. The legislators sat frozen. The unfiltered racism captured in the recording destroyed every attempt at political explanation. They watched Holloway drive the governor against the hood. They heard the metallic click of the handcuffs closing. Then the officer's mocking voice filled the room. The governor? That's a good one. The governor is sitting inside a mansion, buddy. He isn't pumping his own gasoline in a hoodie. The video ended. The silence inside the chamber became suffocating. That is what happens in the darkness, Darius said. His voice cut through the room. That is what happens when a man is stripped of his title, stripped of his suit, and left with nothing except the color of his skin on an isolated road. He looked directly into the cameras broadcasting across the country. I survived because I carried an encrypted telephone and had a heavily armed executive protection team only 2 miles away. Darius paused. But what happens to the young man returning home after a late work shift? His voice grew stronger. What happens to the father driving his daughter to a hospital? No one moved. Police Chief Conrad Baines created an illegal systemic dragnet designed to terrorize minority citizens who crossed into his jurisdiction. Darius's expression hardened. We possess the evidence. He listed the findings. There were 412 illegal stops and 186 unlawful detentions, overwhelmingly targeting young Black and Hispanic men. His voice dropped. They were hunting us. In the front row, Attorney General Gideon Shaw rose while holding a thick folder. He turned toward the chamber. Police Chief Conrad Baines and Officer Bryce Holloway have been taken into state custody, Gideon announced. His commanding prosecutor's voice filled the room. They are being processed on multiple felony charges, including official misconduct, false imprisonment, and evidence tampering. He raised the folder. My office has also transferred the evidence to the United States Department of Justice. Federal civil rights indictments are now being prepared. Panic erupted in the rear of the chamber. A lobbyist representing the police union frantically sent messages while rushing toward the exit, his face pale. The union's narrative was finished. Its leadership had been paralyzed. I did not leave these handcuffs on for dramatic effect, Darius said, drawing the room's attention back to the podium. I left them on because I needed you to feel the complete indignity, the physical and moral violation that citizens experience when power operates without accountability. He looked across the chamber. You cannot look away from this. His voice became harder. You cannot disguise it with public relations language. He turned again, revealing the bruises around his wrists. You are looking directly at the broken system we allowed to grow in darkness. Darius drew a careful breath. His face tightened as the metal pressed into bone. Today I am introducing the Executive Accountability Act. He spoke each provision clearly. It will require independent civilian oversight boards with subpoena authority in every municipality throughout the state. It will remove qualified immunity from officers found guilty of intentional racial profiling, and it will allow the state to decertify corrupt police departments entirely. Darius looked directly at the lawmakers. We will not leave this legislative session until that act has been signed into law. The chamber erupted. This was not polite political applause. It was a thunderous, bipartisan standing ovation. Even the governor's most aggressive conservative opponents rose from their seats, overwhelmed by the undeniable evidence and raw power of the moment. Darius stepped away from the microphone. Von Mercer moved onto the rostrum beside the Attorney General. It is time, sir, Von whispered. Darius nodded. Von removed the small silver key confiscated from Holloway and stepped behind the governor. The entire chamber watched in breathless silence. The key entered the first lock. Click. The left cuff opened. Click. The right cuff followed. The steel restraints fell from Darius's wrists and struck the wooden floor of the rostrum. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Darius slowly brought his arms forward. Television cameras moved closer. His wrists were covered in deep purple bruises and torn, bloodied skin. He did not conceal them. He held his hands before the watching world and slowly rubbed his forearms as circulation returned, bringing a blinding wave of pain and tingling through his fingers. Darius looked down at the discarded cuffs. Then he raised his eyes toward the chamber and the cameras. "The chains are broken today," Governor Darius Langston said quietly. His words carried undeniable finality. "Now we begin the work." He turned and walked away from the rostrum as his protection detail closed around him. The mud-stained, blood-marked handcuffs remained on the mahogany floor of the State House. They became a permanent reminder to everyone inside that chamber that justice arrives only when those with authority are forced to understand the weight of the chains. True power does not come from escaping the painful realities of the world. It comes from possessing the courage to wear the chains of the oppressed and force a broken system into the light. Governor Darius Langston risked his dignity, personal safety, and body to expose a corrupt department that survived in darkness. He proved that no badge can protect a person from the absolute force of truth. If this story of courage, justice, resilience, and accountability made your heart race, do not allow its message to end here. Press the like button to support stories that matter. Share this video with your friends and family to continue the conversation, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, true-to-life stories, proving that truth will always be stronger than fiction. See you in the next story.